This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, let's start with a run through the markets. South African equities had a very strong start to the week. The top 40 closing 2.2% higher and yet another record high. So far in 2021, the top 40 is up by at least 14%. South Africa, as you might recall, did move into a much lower pandemic alert level yesterday. That's generally a net positive for most enterprises in an economy where unemployment rates have soared to over 32%. In East Africa, Nature Media Group shares closed nearly 10% higher. Since the board announced it would execute a share buyback, the stock has rallied by over 14%. We'll also be speaking about Liquid Telecom's oversubscribed over $800 million bond offering in just a moment to the firm's CFO. But first, these are your headlines. Liquid Telecom completes one of the largest dollar bond sales, raising over $800 million for the expansion of its broadband business. Somalia Central Bank licenses the country's first and largest mobile money operator. And the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been sentenced to jail for corruption. All that and more is in the pipeline for you tonight. But let's start the hour in the telecommunications sector. Liquid Telecom has wrapped up one of the largest dollar bond sales by an African telecommunications company, raising $840 million. Now, the cash will be used in part to pay down existing debt and increase access to broadband services further in the continent. The bond was launched on the 22nd of February. It was more than 5 times oversubscribed. It attracted over 230 investor orders, including anchor orders from the International Finance Corporation, which put in $100 million. Owned by Strive Macieo's Econet Global, Liquid's first fiber link went into the ground back in 2009. Since then, it's installed more than 70,000 kilometers of fiber optic cables across the continent. It operates 5 data centers in South Africa, Kenya, and Rwanda. All right, then, so let's dig into the financial details of this bond offering. Kate Hennessy is the Group CFO at Liquid Telecom. She joins us live from London tonight. Kate, thank you for your time this evening. So this bond was 5 times oversubscribed, and the coupon rate really is a story here. Much, much smaller, 300 basis points lower than the 2017 issuance at 5.5%. How did we get to such favorable pricing?
Thanks, Rama. Well, it is fantastic. That's all I can say. We're absolutely delighted with the pricing. And we believe this reflects investor confidence in both Liquid Telecom as well as African enterprises more widely. Africa offers huge growth opportunity, but unlike other regions of the world, this also comes with the ability to drive real developmental change that will improve societies by investing in local people and infrastructure and bridging the connectivity divide. This is supported, as you know, by socio-demographic changes such as population growth, increased urbanization, as well as growing fixed line and mobile penetration, which will drive exponential data usage growth from which Liquid is uniquely placed to build on. Against this backdrop, we have, over more than a decade, built out an infrastructure that's unparalleled in Africa, an infrastructure that would take years to replicate, and frankly, due to our open access approach, one that would not be financially viable for any other player to build out, providing great barriers to entry. As you mentioned in your piece, we were able to attract 3 DFIs, the IFC, DEG and EAIF into the refinance, and I think this really helped with investor confidence. Increasingly investors are focused on environmental, social and governance or ESG matters, and we're in a bit of a sweet spot here. And indeed, one of our banking partners, JP Morgan's DFI report on the bond reflects Liquid's position in advancing the United Nations Sustainability and Developmental Goals associated with promoting economic growth, as well as building resilient infrastructure, promoting sustainable industrialization and fostering innovation. I think all of those things just, became a sweet spot, and the pricing is just fantastic. News not only for Liquid, but also for other African enterprises wishing to raise money.
Indeed, fantastic is a bit of an understatement. You're borrowing at a coupon rate that's lower than a few African sovereigns. That's lower than what Ghana got when they went into the market with their Eurobond last year.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's just a fantastic outcome. And, we were hoping for a substantially better rate. We didn't think we would get it as good as that. And I think, it really does show to, investors that Africa is the growth engine. That's where they're going to find growth, after the pandemic. If they're looking for places to invest, that's where to go.
Indeed. So how much of this cash that was raised will go into refinancing the $733 million of debt, net debt that the firm had at the end of May last year?
Yeah, so the majority of it will be used to refinance our existing debt, but there will be an amount left that we can use on our growth strategy by continuing to scale our infrastructure in untapped areas and expanding our range of technology solutions and providing increasing number of customers with access to services via the cloud, democratizing solutions that in the past businesses wouldn't have had the financial resources to benefit from.
Indeed, the data center side of the business, you've always flagged that in your results announcement. How's that going so far? What's the uptake like for the data center services you have on offer?
Yeah, I mean, the data centers are doing extremely well. We have a separate expansion plan for them outside of the bond group. As I'm sure you'll recall from the press, recently they've raised their own debt financing via the DFC, who are the US DFI. So they have a full expansion plan based around using that funding to expand data centers across the continent. There's huge demand for data center services in the areas that we're in already. So as you mentioned in the start of your article, we've got data centers in South Africa and in Kenya, and those are doing extremely well. But we also want to expand to other areas. So, there's lots of demand in places like Nigeria, in Egypt, in many other places across Africa, which really are underserved at the moment.
So when the pandemic first spread into countries in which you operate, the firm did draw down on part of a revolving credit line to bolster liquidity, something to the tune of $40 million, if I recall. Nearly a year later, though, how has the pandemic affected the firm's cash flow? And should we expect any future drawdowns, or are you fine as things stand at the moment?
Yeah, firstly, I would say, the business is inherently resilient against the COVID pandemic, with increased demand for connectivity in the lockdown environment, including some accelerated demand for cloud services. The biggest impact on us was FX, where we've seen significant year-on-year depreciations in local currencies versus the US dollar, which impacts our financials. And thankfully, these have been stabilizing more recently. We've been managing our working capital carefully through the pandemic and afterwards. And we've been conserving cash by being very targeted on investing in key growth projects. We did see a spike in churn, and it has impacted our debtors, but we have managed this and seen a return to more normal levels on churn, whilst our bad debt provision provides for adequate cover. And clearly we continue to monitor these areas very closely. The bond deal, though it's been announced, has not formally closed as yet, though we don't anticipate needing to draw down the RCF.
Indeed. One last question for you, Kate. Liquid also did put out an offer to buy back $730 million of 8.5% notes due next year. What's the response to that been like?
Well, the response has been amazing. I mean, really amazing. We're absolutely delighted that so many of our pre-existing bondholders were interested in tendering and participating in the new deal. As you've noted yourself, we've received an extraordinary number of investor inquiries. Over 230 were interested in the new issue. As the transaction isn't fully closed as yet, we can't release details on this, but needless to say, we're extremely proud and happy that so many investors are interested in building Africa's digital future.
Indeed. We'll leave it there for the time being. Kate Hennessy from Liquid Telecom. Thank you very much. Now let's move on to the business of trade. Nigeria's former finance minister, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, on Monday took over officially as a new Director General of the World Trade Organization. Iweala was elected last month as the first woman and the first African to lead the institution. Her first day at the helm of the WTO coincides with a meeting of its top decision-making body, the General Council. Its 164 member states will be discussing a range of topics like trade rules on COVID-19 vaccine distribution, on which Okonjo-Iweala has identified as a priority. On the agenda is also the date and the venue for a major ministerial conference, which was due to be held in Kazakhstan last year, but was delayed, obviously, due to the pandemic.
It's been 20 years, and 20 years is enough. That's my slogan. Now we have to get it done. So that's what I have to say. So we're totally in sync. with you on that.
That's a message about the request to the WTO to urgently advance the discussions and conclude an agreement to end the funding of overfishing.
Up north to Egypt now. Authorities over there have signed an agreement with Israel to build an undersea natural gas pipeline linking the two countries. The North African nation is seeking to become a major hub for exporting liquefied natural gas to Europe, where demand is growing as governments try and transition from, well, more polluting fossil fuels like coal and oil. Here's Yasser Hakim with the details from Cairo.
The main deal signed with Israel is to construct a pipeline to connect Israel's Leviathan gas field with liquefied natural gas plants in Egypt. The aim is to increase Israel's natural gas exports to Europe and for Egypt to maximize use of its recently reopened liquefaction plants after an 8-year closure. The North African country is also targeting more gas exports after achieving self-sufficiency in natural gas 2 years ago.
The natural gas prices are linked to the Brent crude prices, and since Brent price is increasing, then the timing is right for exports. Since it's liquefied gas and it's located in a central area between the east and west, therefore the price of Egyptian natural gas that will be transported to the Mediterranean will be competitive internationally.
Meanwhile, Egypt has signed a memorandum of understanding with the Palestinian Authority to develop the Gaza Marine Field, establish an electric power station in Jenin, and provide natural gas for the Palestinian people.
Egypt can do a lot for Palestine by helping them benefit from natural gas reserves in the Gaza waters through exploration and building pipelines to transport gas to Gaza and the rest of the Palestinian territories. Egypt can also help Palestine liquefy its natural gas and export it to create revenue for the Palestinian Authority.
Egypt, Palestine, and Israel are founding members of the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. Cairo has been stepping up its explorations and export facilities, hoping to become the natural gas hub in the East Mediterranean in the near future. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Let's get back into the world of technology across the continent. A report by Google and the International Finance Corporation estimates that Africa's internet economy has a potential to add about 5.2% to the continent's GDP by 2025. That report essentially shows that driving this growth is a combination of increased access to much faster quality internet connectivity at a lower price as well. The report's analysis conducted by Accenture also argues that in 2020, the continent's internet GDP may contribute approximately $115 billion to Africa's overall GDP output of about $2.5 trillion. According to Partech Ventures Africa, venture capital funding for startups has also gone up year on year for the past 5 years, with $2.02 billion in equity funding raised in 2019. Let's dig into the details of that report. Wale Ayeni is the acting global head of disruptive technologies and venture capital investments at IFC. He's joining us from Washington with more details on this study. Wale, good to have you on the program. So this report is arguing that tech use and productivity gains from tech could add at least $180 billion to GDP by 2025. Walk us through the assumptions that led to that forecast.
Thanks for the question, and thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure here. Generally, the internet has contributed to GDP. Like in the Western world, there's about 9% of GDP is because of the internet. And kind of the background to the report was through our partners at Accenture. We analyzed historically what has been the historical contribution of the internet to African GDP. I think in 10 years ago, it was about 1.1%. By 2020, that grew up to 4.5%. So the analysis that Accenture just did was extrapolating all of the historical data and then attaching it to kind of the initial growth rate, things like social media, internet connectivity, the adoption of cell phones, and seeing what that could lead to for 5 years from now. So the work was done by economists from Accenture, and then kind of the result was that there's a potential for kind of the internet economy in Africa to grow up to $115 80 billion in the year 2025. And that's kind of a near-term opportunity. And what we're seeing on the ground when you look at just the rate of the financing from startups is that there's a lot of ways in which the internet can contribute to the economy, whether that's financial services, whether that's ed tech, whether that's e-commerce. So we're seeing a lot of activities there. So there's a lot of both academic data, but also on-the-ground data that kind of supports kind of the potential trajectory of the internet to contribute that amount to the African GDP.
Indeed. I'll get back to the counter-arguments in a moment. But one of the things that stood out for me in the report was this argument that was made very prominently that the internet economy on the continent is one of the largest overlooked investment opportunities in the last decade. But I'll just come back to the basic question. Why is it overlooked? As you pointed out, every single data point shows there's opportunity here. But where's the money? Why is it overlooked?
I mean, that's kind of why we wrote the report, to actually highlight the opportunity as well, because the part of the issue is kind of just the PR around Africa. So when you look at Africa, people don't see it as a destination for digital economy, for the internet. But on the contrary, when you flip the coin, is that when you look at venture capital, which I'm part of, is that venture capital is a business of investing in the future. The African continent is the youngest continent on the planet. 60% of everybody here is below the age of 25. So the rate of adoption of technology is actually highest, though growing very, very rapidly in Africa. But traditionally, Africa has not been looked at as a destination for investment. So I'll give you some stats there. Now, when you look at it as a percentage of GDP, the global venture capital pool every year is about $200 billion invested in the space. As you said, the Patek report just showed that although it has grown in the last 5 years, is only $2 billion has been invested in venture capital in Africa. That's like 1% of total venture capital kind of investments. But that doesn't jive with kind of what the opportunity set actually is. And if you do the analysis as venture capital as a percentage of GDP, the rate is the lowest in Africa. In the US, it's about 8%. In India, it's about 3%. In Africa, it's actually about less than 1% of investments. 1% of GDP goes into venture capital investments. And I think that the reason for that is historically, Africa has historically been looked upon not as a traditional destination for kind of digital investments. But I think that trajectory is changing just because of the youth, and then also because of the caliber of the new kind of founders that we're seeing on the ground. And I say that because that's the most important thing, because when you talk about the digital economy, it's really, really, really at the bottom of it is about entrepreneurship. Is that the new kind of digital entrepreneurs that we're seeing in Africa now, they're talented, they're skilled, they understand how the world works, so they're trained globally, and they're coming back to Africa to build big and large businesses that are pan-African in nature. And I think that is actually the crux of the matter, is that historically investors have not seen those kind of entrepreneurs, but those entrepreneurs are starting to emerge in Africa.
Is part of the problem also perhaps that they tend to think of Africa as a sort of monolithic entity? Because one of the other things that comes out in your report is that there's a lot of nuance around, for example, to use the developers that you're talking about. There are about 700,000 of them, but they're concentrated in about just 5 countries: Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Egypt, and Morocco. And yet, if we just talk about Africa as this monolithic entity, we're missing that granular country focus.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think it's Africa. There's a lot of nuance in Africa. There are 54 countries. It's very fragmented. But the opportunity actually that I see in with technology is that, just as the internet, is that you can actually use the internet to aggregate all that market and present it as a one Pan-African opportunity per se. There's a lot of nuance, country by country, destination, age groups, kind of the opportunity set. But holistically, the internet helps to aggregate kind of the entire African market to present it as a one large opportunity subset. It's not dissimilar to what we see in India, where there's a lot of fragmentation in India, but India is still one continent, right? And I think in Africa, the internet provides that opportunity where we can start to aggregate a lot of the smaller markets, put them in one kind of opportunity zone, and drive investments and services to populations that actually live there.
One last question for you, Ale. One of the underlying assumptions behind the growth forecasts lies in growth continuing pretty much as it has in the last decade. But if you look at the policy sets that are coming up on the ground, we're seeing more and more countries either trying to limit internet traffic or they're trying to levy taxes that retard growth. Given that sort of environment, aren't these forecasts a bit too optimistic?
No, I mean, like I hear you on kind of the taxation, and we won't worry about it because you don't want to tax things that are just nascent. So before we get into taxation and over regulation, we need to allow innovation to grow first of all. So I agree with you around kind of in countries where we see unnecessary taxation for early stage startups. We don't think that's the right thing, and that could challenge some of the forecast. But overall, no matter what governments do, I think it's too late to put the internet back in a box. The genie is out of the box. It's scaling. When you look at things like just the number of smartphones, the number of feature phones, the number of Africans that are accessing data every day, the bandwidth of data consumption in Africa is actually growing. So I think no matter what governments do, I think we've passed the notion where you can lock the internet out. I think most governments understand that the internet, there's pros and cons, but there's more pros than there are cons, right? There are issues around taxation, which we hope that the governments find a balance between proper taxation and allowing innovation to scale. But on the balance, we just feel like just the adoption and the youth engagement with the internet, it's definitely growing. And I don't think there's anything that people can do to put that back in the box.
Indeed. Wale Emi from the IFC, thank you very much for your time. Time now for run through some company headlines. Telecommunications still in focus. Let's start with South Africa's MTN Group. It says it plans to appeal against a ruling to place its Syrian business under judicial guardianship. MTN Syria was placed under guardianship last week over alleged violations of the terms of its license. MTN has denied these allegations. The appointed guardian, who's a chair of MTN Syria minority shareholder Televest, will be responsible for managing day-to-day operations while this guardianship order remains in effect. Lawmakers in Kenya have cleared a bill aimed at regulating mobile loan apps, often non-deposit-taking ones. The Central Bank of Kenya Bill of 2020 amendment will issue guidelines that will protect borrowers from predatory lending, including regulating lending rates and the treatment of defaulters. Kenyans and stakeholders will now be invited to give their views on the bill, which is before the National Assembly Committee on Finance and National Planning. The French energy group EDF has bought a 50% stake in a solar energy firm Econet Energy Kenya and a 23% stake in the off-grid energy firm Bbox Kenya. EDF is already present in the Kenyan market with regard to solar irrigation pumps for smallholder farmers with its partner Sunculture, but now it plans to extend its off-grid offer to the residential market, and it targets to hook up more than 2 million Kenyans to off-grid power by 2025. And finally, an Indian trade group representing some 150,000 mobile phone stores has urged the government to investigate Amazon's business practices in the country. Indian retailers have long alleged that Amazon and Walmart's Flipkart flout federal regulations and that their business practices hurt SMEs. The companies run the two biggest e-commerce platforms in India. They have denied the allegations. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Plenty more coming up, including this. Somalia Central Bank has licensed the country's first and largest mobile money operator. And players in Nigeria's leather industry want to raise revenues by $1 billion. How will they do that? We'll explore that next.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairobi. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back to the program. Somalia's central bank has issued the first mobile money license to the country's largest telecommunications provider, Telecom. Now, the move seeks to formalize the country's vast, sprawling digital payment systems and also allow it to integrate with the global financial system. Now, Telecom runs the electronic voucher card, or EVC Plus. It's a free mobile money service used by 3 million of its 3.6 million subscribers in Somalia. With this particular license, EVC Plus will now be subject to central bank regulation, and that ideally should boost confidence in the country's mobile money system. Although the EVC Plus recognizes both the Somali shilling and US dollars, it only operates on the greenback because Somalia's economy is being dollarized for the most part due to a steep devaluation in the value of the Somali shilling. Abdulaziz Billo joins us now with more details on this particular story. So, Abdulaziz, give us a sense of how integral mobile money services are to daily commerce in Somalia, because back in 2018 the World Bank was estimating that we're looking at monthly transactions of nearly $3 billion. What has changed since then?
Well, you're right, Rama. The money banking system in Somalia has taken a dramatic change in recent years. We're seeing almost all telephone operators coming up with that financial service that is allowing its clients to use mobile currency as a form of exchange instead. Because of the currency situation in Somalia, the old Somali currency is in bad shape. Ever since the civil war erupted in Somalia, there's been no currency that has been printed. That's why you find that the only thing that has allowed Somali telecom operators to thrive, and the Somali community in general to thrive, is the use of mobile currency. And literally, apart from the biggest telephone company operator, Telecom, nearly all of them are coming up with this system service, and they're trying to lure more clients into that. There's also the formation of banking services that also allow clients to put their money in their bank, and they can be able to get them through their phone. So they're trying to regulate these informal transaction system into the formal system, and that's why the Central Bank of Somalia rather, is trying to take a lead now in regulating all these telecom operators.
Indeed, so mobile money services are already fairly widely used in Somalia. I mean, they're basically how things get done on a daily basis across the country. So what is the problem, the specific problem, that the central bank was trying to solve by essentially issuing this license? Is this about anti-money laundering and terror financing regulations, or is it more beyond that?
Well, it has to do with the recently passed laws in Somalia that try to tackle illicit money laundering and funds that should not go into the hands of a militant group, Al-Shabaab, and the Islamic State militants, ISIL. So technically, the Central Bank of Kenya wants to be the overall regulatory body. The Central Bank of Somalia, rather, wants to be the regulatory body that is tasked with overseeing the funds and how they're channeled into the country. But back in the days, for years, telecom operators were not regulated because of the absence of a strong Somali government. That's why you will find that telecom operators did not even have to register their clients. The SIM card that one uses not necessarily had to be registered, but over the years, due to these threats of the militant group Al-Shabaab and terror financing, you find that the government is enforcing that all telecom operators register their clients' SIM cards. That way, they can be able to use the online and the mobile money system service. So technically, it's about tackling the insurgency and the militant threat, and also trying to show that the Central Bank of Somalia is back, the Somali government is back, and is trying to take charge of the regulatory body in charge of finance.
Let me get back to the biggest mobile money service provider, Telecom. I understand they don't charge transaction fees, and they don't charge withdrawal fees either. So how do they make their money on the mobile money service side?
Well, you're right, and that is one reason that mobile money service in Somalia is thriving, because the traders are not able to be taxed or pay a certain amount for any direct transaction. But if you look at Hormuz Telecom, for instance, it covers the vast south-central Somalia, almost a population of close to 4 million people all across south-central Somalia. It is the biggest telecom service operator in Somalia, and it not just benefits only from the mobile direct payment, it also provides internet services, it also has a banking system. So in essence, instead of people just putting their money directly into their mobile phones, this telecom operator company, Hormuz, has its own banking system called the Salam Somali Bank. Mostly people have to open an account with them, place their currency there. They can be able to use this money directly from their mobile phone. So this is one of the reasons as to why it's encouraging that people should not be taxed, and that way traders can be able to buy goods and services at no extra cost. In one way, it is luring people to join their banking system that has now begun to catch up, even though they're yet to produce a MasterCard and a Visa card. They've not yet been formalized as compared to other banking system services in Somalia. But then again, many Somalis argue, and financial experts, the fact that when you're being given a digital currency, it is Hormuz that takes the paper money, the cash, and this is one way that the cash in circulation is run by Hormuz, and that's why we find that the Central Bank of Kenya wants to regulate the exact amount of money that is coming through this system, because they don't want any of these funds to go into the militant group Al-Shabaab or Islamic State militants. But even in Somalia, the normal trader, even the Polish guy on the street, will always have that number that where you can send the money directly, because the current state of the currency in Somalia is deplorable. The government has promised to print new currency, which they have not yet, and that's why you find that all these companies are creating till numbers where people can be able to buy goods and services, and they're now even improving it more because people are using a barcode specifically to buy goods and services.
Indeed, we'll leave it there for the time being. Abdulaziz Billo with the details on that story on mobile money in Somalia. Thank you. Now, on to Ethiopia. The country's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has laid the cornerstone for a $60 million concrete asphalt road project. It's an 80-kilometer road that's expected to be completed in about 4 years. It's hoped that it will transform one of Ethiopia's coffee-producing areas by linking it to the heart of the country. Here's Girum Chala with the details.
This area, found in western Ethiopia, is rich with coffee and other products, but has long been forgotten. And it has been suffering from a lack of proper road infrastructure. That has made life in general and business in particular difficult to undertake. Now, all that will be a thing of the past, thanks to the commissioning of a 80 kilometers Jimma-Chida concrete asphalt road project. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said this new road project will bring people together.
Our plan is simply converting the paved road that served for the last 39 years into a concrete asphalt road. That will enable us to bring two brotherly people together.
This vital road project will cost $60 million, and its construction will be carried out by the China-based Tianju Civil Engineering Group. Ethiopian Prime Minister said the economic significance of the new road project will be immense.
Jimma is a rich area and Konta similarly is a rich locality. At the same time, the entire southwestern Ethiopia region is unbelievably rich. People there are too kind-hearted. But so far, we've been unable to tap into the resources and assets we have. This road will now change everything for the better.
Residents of Jimma and Chida area said the new road, when completed, will assist them to sell their coffee, fruits and other products easily. In addition, the road will also help bring more tourists to the widely known Chabara Chochora Park.
This is really a short distance in terms of kilometers, but we have suffered throughout our life to access some of the basic services in major cities. This project has brought with itself great opportunities in all areas. We used to pay beyond tariff. Now that will be history. We see light at the end of the tunnel.
Ethiopia is currently undertaking the construction of several multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects right across the country. Apart from the building of roads, railways and airports, the country is also busy completing several hydropower dams, including the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. All this is hoped to make the Eastern Africa country a hub for the light manufacturing industry. Group Chala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
On to West Africa. Nigeria's leather industry is worth roughly $500 million at the moment. But the players in there have a very ambitious goal. They want to raise revenues by at least $1 billion amidst increased international and domestic demand for leather products. But some of the key players in the sector say they still face a whole host of challenges. Telecom Akenda reports from Jos.
These African designs are just a few among Shuaibu Abdullahi's many works. He's been producing leather works like wallets, bags and face caps for more than 40 years, and he says the business is lucrative.
The leather business has been very profitable to me, my family and members of my community. We're all successful producers using leather.
He also says he has trained over 6,000 people in leather work in his community.
This community has become a household name in Jos because of their expertise in leather making. They say it's the best way for young people in the village to become self-reliant.
Nigeria's National Bureau of Statistics says the nation's leather industry is worth over $500 million. It's an industry that could continue to grow if demand keeps up. However, producers like Abdullahi say they lack modern equipment to increase their productivity, which is why they want the government to step in.
We can deliver much better leather works with support from the government to acquire better machines.
Experts say Nigeria needs to diversify its economy away from oil, and offering more support to the leather industry is one way to do that.
They need to be encouraged, they need to be packaged, and government needs to help them with marketing. Once there's significant input in terms of export, it's going to diversify automatically, and it's going to enrich the people at macro level.
The Central Bank of Nigeria has committed to providing loan facilities to leather producers in the country. Until then, people like Shuaibu Abdullahi can only continue to hope to cash in on the opportunities that lie ahead. Telecom Akenda, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
Now, South Africa's pandemic lockdown has dragged on for the better part of a year. It slowed down economic activity and it sent the unemployment rate to record levels, just under 33%. Women remain the main caregivers for their families, and they've felt the pinch much more than men. As incomes dry up through this prolonged lockdown, this is likely to get worse. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
South Africa's economy took a devastating blow during the COVID-19 lockdown, but women have been left worse off than men.
In April, which was the first month of total lockdown, so everything was shut down except for essential services. Of the 3 million jobs that were lost, just under 2 million belonged to women. The fact that the services sector was the one that hit most, so this affected women largely.
The clothing bank in Cape Town, which helps females start their own businesses, had hundreds of women flock to their doors in a desperate search for work.
We've really got a lot of applications. We had to turn the applications to doing them online because of the protocols, the COVID protocols. But there is a crisis out there. So we had to, in fact, start a whole food scheme during the lockdown because we were really getting a lot of requests from people saying, please, can you do something? Please help us.
The bank was only able to accommodate some of the women who had nowhere else to turn.
A lot of companies closed, and especially in the area where I live, most of our women works in clothing factories. And they were very hard hit in terms of companies closing and never actually opened after we went back to level 3. Most of our women in our areas is single parents, dependent on the social grant.
I'm a mother of one child, a son, and I'm unemployed. I'm at the clothing bank at the moment as a trainee. It's really stressful. You feel small because you can't provide for your family, especially for my child. You can't pay school fees, you can't pay transport, you have to rely on someone else.
Women have suffered the brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic, raising concerns that gender inequalities in the labor market have worsened.
So your level of education is affecting how COVID is impacting you. So people with less than 12 years of education have been the highest hit in terms of job losses. This again goes to our history because of the inequalities in terms of education, inequalities in terms of access.
There's been huge progress in South Africa over the last 20 years to include women in the job market and elevate them to management positions. But many of those gains are being eroded by the marathon lockdown. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
It's around 1840 GMT. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a break. Here's what's coming up. The former French President Nicolas Sarkozy sentenced to jail for corruption. And the UK plans to spend another $7 billion to help businesses hit hard by the pandemic. The details coming up shortly.
No one again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces towards the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
The actor, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. These are some of the stories making your headlines at this hour. Let's start in the world of vaccinations. The UN-backed vaccine drive COVAX has started distribution of doses across the African continent. The body aims to vaccinate at least 6 million people in the continent. That's roughly 20% of the population by the end of 2021. In Kenya, the National Drought Management Authority has issued an alert over the deteriorating condition of both livestock and households in Mandera County. An ongoing drought since January has been badly affecting food security in the country's arid northeastern region. The former Nigerian Finance Minister, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, took over on Monday as the new Director General of the World Trade Organization. Ngozi was last month elected as the first woman and the first African to lead the institution. Her first day at the helm of the body coincides with the meeting of its top decision-making body, the General Council. Its 164 member states will discuss a range of topics, including trade rules on COVID-19 vaccine distribution as well. And as we discussed in the last part of the hour, the Central Bank of Somalia has issued the first mobile money license to the country's largest telecoms provider, Telecom. The move seeks to formalize the country's digital payment system and integrate it into the global financial system. That's a run through your headlines. The former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been sentenced to 3 years in jail, but 2 of those years have been suspended. Mr. Sarkozy has denied any charges of wrongdoing in the case. He was, of course, facing charges of corruption. He has 10 days to appeal the ruling. The 66-year-old is found guilty of trying to bribe a magistrate by offering him a prestigious job in return for information about a separate criminal case against the former president. The magistrate and Sarkozy's former lawyer got similar sentences as well. Sarkozy is also due to go on trial in a separate case from the 17th of March to the 15th of April. He's accused of having fraudulently overspent in his 2012 presidential campaign. Sarkozy served as France's president between 2007 and 2012. Across the channel, the UK plans to create another $7 billion grant program to help businesses that have been hit very hard by the pandemic. The Restart program will mostly apply to retail, hospitality and leisure. These are the industries that have been affected the most by a series of pandemic lockdowns imposed last year. Nicole Johnston reports from London.
Almost a year on from the pandemic and London still looks like this. Empty streets and shuttered businesses. It's the same all over the UK. The country has been locked down since the start of the year and won't fully open up until summer at the earliest. But now the government is offering one-off grants of up to $25,000 for restaurants, pubs and non-essential shops to tide them over until they can reopen.
Well, I think given the scale of the shock that we've experienced, this isn't a problem that we're going to be able to fix overnight. It's going, of course, to take time. But I think the key thing is right now to keep supporting the economy as we have been, provide that reassurance to families, make sure that support is in place as we move through the roadmap.
Restaurateur Sam Harrison says the biggest problem for most businesses is trying to pay their rent after months of lockdown.
Rent is very complicated, but it's basically the biggest overhead for most restaurants. And technically, by the terms of a lease, most of us still have to pay rent while we're unable to trade.
There are 700,000 shops, restaurants, gyms and hair salons eligible for the High Street grants. Already, the government has borrowed $377 billion during this pandemic, but it has to be paid back. And there are indications that increased taxes are coming for high-income earners and corporations. The UK has borrowed money while interest rates are at an historic low. The Chancellor is concerned that just a 1 percentage point increase would cost the government an extra $34 billion a year to service its debt. Back at the restaurant, and Sam Harrison wants to see business rates relief, an extension of furlough and support for rent.
Sadly, a lot of restaurants and hospitality businesses are just going to run out of money. And, you know, most of us are losing money every week at the moment just to stay alive. I'm hoping it's not true, but I think by the end of the summer we could easily have 30% of restaurants in London closed.
And if that does happen, the fear is that there's little this budget can deliver to bring them back. Nicole Johnston, CGTN, London.
China recently unveiled plans to build its strength in the transport sector for the next 15 years. But what exactly does creating a modern transport system entail? Wang Wenjie has the details.
Convenient, cost-effective, green, intelligent and safe. These are all key factors in China's modern transport system. to be complete by 2035. In regards to implementation, the Minister for Transport proposed 3 methods to strengthen the construction.
Promote the transportation development systematically in major regions, promote the coordination of transport development between urban and rural regions, and strengthen interconnectivity cooperation.
The plan states that National 123 Travel Circle and Global 123 Logistics Circle will take initial shape by 2035 to connect major cities and counties across the country. The National 123 Travel Circle refers to a 1-hour commute time in cities, 2 hours travel time within city clusters, and 3 hours to travel between major domestic cities. The Global 123 Logistics Circle means a 1-day delivery to destinations with China, 2-day delivery to neighboring countries, and 3-day delivery to major global cities. The comprehensive transportation network will cover rail, roads, waterways, civil aviation airports, and logistic hubs over the next 15 years. Innovation and technology will play an essential role in achieving this goal by 2035.
Will promote the digitization and networking of transportation infrastructure, improve the level of smart transportation development, and coordinate development and safety.
The plan calls for building a people-centered transport system. It says this is central to the concept of integrating all means of travel into a single digital platform. The model still lacks maturity, as experts try to better connect and integrate the different systems. But we can still expect to hear more about it in the future. Wang Mengjie, CGTN, Beijing.
Morocco's aerospace industry has seen a drop in exports by nearly a third, obviously due to the pandemic. But as CGTN's Astatal now reports, the industry is starting to recover. Manufacturers have pivoted into other high-tech sectors, including medical equipment.
Morocco's Aerospace Suppliers Association says the industry has been comparatively resilient, and its first signs of recovery are appearing. Exports reportedly fell by $1.3 billion from $1.9 billion in 2019 due to the pandemic. Reduced air traffic lowered demands for civilian planes and hit orders along the supply chain.
Before COVID-19, a growth of 20% was recorded for several years. It is a significant technological development. But with the arrival of the pandemic, air transport stopped abruptly, which has impacted by a domino effect the entire industrial chain of aeronautics.
Morocco's government has been encouraging investments in the country by aerospace suppliers. The move hopes to match its success in car manufacturing by creating hubs to shorten supply chains and share expertise.
We have developed other products such as mask machines in partnership with the Renault. These machines are to provide mask manufacturers with a Moroccan tool, also produced 100% locally. All these small experiences pushed us to now create a biomedical cluster which will serve as a kickoff of a medical and medical devices industry in Morocco.
Many in the industry believe carbon-free production is key to remaining on the map of the global aerospace industry. The recent announcement by Airbus to make a carbon-free aircraft by 2035 has given hope to those in the aerospace industry. Astatal, CGTN.
Quick run through commodity prices. The production decision by the OPEC Plus grouping later this week on the 4th of March, that will be a big feature of the news cycle this week. Remember, Saudi Arabia took 1 million barrels of production offline for February and March, and that continues this month too. But what happens thereafter? That is the key question facing the market. Gold continues its broad losing streak in 2021, down about 8.4% so far in the year. It's gone as low as $1,730 an ounce in today's session. Here's what's coming up next. We'll explore how rising insecurity is threatening strawberry production in Nigeria when we come back.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And and no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to the program. Strawberry farmers in northern Nigeria say the country can generate a lot more revenue from exporting the product at scale if the security situation there improves. The country's shift of focus from agriculture since its discovery of crude oil has created a scarcity of fruits grown domestically, strawberries among them. CGTN's Tessa Makende has this report from Jos.
Strawberries in Nigeria can only be grown naturally in and around Nigeria's north-central city of Jos. 35-year-old Jerry Doubles is a strawberry farmer. He says there's a huge market for strawberries in the country.
Now, the demand is very high, but then say that there's a time where there are people not asking for strawberries is almost impossible.
But meeting the demand with local produce is a challenge. This strawberry farm is over 4 hectares. But the farmers here say if it wasn't for insecurity in the region, they would have expanded and grown more strawberries. In the first 6 weeks of 2021, more than 1,500 farmers across the country, including Jos, have lost their lives to herders and farmer clashes, according to the Council on Foreign Relations. Agriculturally, say the government needs to do more to address the challenges.
Nigeria has a lot of potentials, and compared to other countries like China, USA and Mexico, who are the world largest strawberry producers, if we can meet up with them by expanding the production of strawberry. But because of lack of funds, insecurity and other things.
Strawberries are a rich source of vitamin C and other nutrients. The global strawberry market is projected to hit over $25 billion in 2025. And many consumers here say they prefer these locally grown strawberries.
I prefer to buy the strawberries here in Jos because they are naturally grown, sweet and better than the one we import.
It feels really good taking strawberries from Jos. I really hope farmers will be encouraged for improved yield.
But until insecurity in Jos is dealt with, farmers like Jerry Double say they won't taste the full potential of Nigeria's strawberry crop. Tassim Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
All right, then around through the currencies as we wrap up the hour. The rand ended February cresting over the 15 to the dollar mark, but it started March on a decent note. It's clawing back some of those losses. 14.9119, strongest point in today's session. In East Africa, Kenyan shilling still hovering around the 110 to the dollar mark. Zambia's currency, though, the kwacha, it hit a record low in today's session, 21.84 to the dollar. The descent this year has been pretty gradual. It's ceded around 3% to the dollar. But remember, last year, the kwacha slid by at least 50% against the greenback. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. Many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramanyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.